Okay, so good morning, everybody. We're going to try and thank you, Nadine. Good effort on that one. We're going to get started, so if I could ask for your attention, please. I just wanted to, again, welcome everyone to the conference, particularly those who are unable to make the keynote session last night. For those who haven't had a chance to meet me, or I've just been running around and you haven't had a chance to say hi, my name is Sarah Breen, and I'm the president of the Canadian Rural Revitalization Foundation. For those who are unfamiliar with the foundation, we're an organization of a lot of different people who share one thing in common, and that is a passion for rural places. And so I'm really excited for all of you to be here today at this conference. I think it's absolutely fantastic for us to be able to sit around these tables with folks that share different interests and be able to come around that common theme of rural and be able to talk about those things and learn from each other. All right, now on to the main part of the morning. I would like to introduce Brian Fry, who's our keynote this morning. He's an entrepreneur, amazing technology whiz, a great skier from what I hear. And I will leave him to tell you about all the exciting projects he's working on.
Thank you, Sarah. And it is such a pleasure to be here. I am a rural Canadian through and through, and I'm going to be talking about how rural Canada can win with the fourth industrial revolution. And maybe you didn't know there was a fourth industrial revolution, but I'll be talking about that too. And it is so significant, it's so exciting. Just to give you an idea of how passionate I am about this, where's my right button here? There is no real book, this is just a Photoshop idea. For the last 20 years, I've been imagining a point in time where I could actually write a book. I'm not an author, I don't know if the book will ever be written, so this may be the closest thing that you're going to see to my book. I grew up in a Canadian rural town. 3,500 people when I was growing up, and probably still 3,500 people, really hasn't changed very much. But what was so significant about this town is in its early days, it was a gold mining town, built smelters, it created all kinds of opportunity. This was truly an amazing time. Billions, equivalents of billions of dollars came out of the mines, great things happened. That club that you just saw in that previous picture led to, was a ski club, also led to my ski club, which I was part of in the 70s, so that previous picture was in the 30s. This is the 70s. There are 25 kids in this picture. We all ski race together. 9 of us went to the national ski team. That happened in a rural town of 30,000 people. A number that is so significant, so statistically almost impossible, when ski teams typically produce maybe one ski racer every 10 years to go to the national ski team. So I went through the process. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. I had a really bad crash in 1983, and if you can imagine, when you've lived this young life and you're on this skyrocketing curve, I was with Ken Reed and Stephen Forrest, all these other people, it was such an opportunity, but suddenly that was over, and I had to go off to school. I didn't even go to high school. I was hardly ever there. My teachers literally pushed me through and passed me and allowed me to get through the classroom. But what I did was I took what I learned from the sport and my rural background, and I applied it, and I got into Selkirk College, and then I managed to convince the dean of the BCIT to let me go to school there. And that came together. And along the way, I got the technology bug. I really, really thought this is something else. This is 1984, 85. So at the time, this is pretty early on for the technology industry. Stayed in Vancouver, built 5 companies while I was there. I'll just mark the companies that I actually had share ownership in along the way. This little company here was pretty well the internet before the internet existed, so it was really exciting. Document image management company. Everything was happening in the right direction. I managed to fill that big gap that I had for my ski racing career with technology. And then I ended up going up to Silicon Valley, the pinnacle of where I wanted to be. The interesting thing, if you look at this picture, I had 2 young kids. And so I was really enjoying being there. And then suddenly I realized my 3- and 5-year-old were in a concrete jungle. They weren't having the rural life. They weren't having that great experiences that I had. And I started to feel really bad about the fact that I was being selfish. I had taken them there, taken my wife there, and I called my wife one day and said, you know what, we need to move back. We need to go back to our rural lifestyle. And the internet was just starting to happen. You can imagine dial-up, and we're starting to see a little bit of the DSL and cable internet. I said, I think I can do it with the internet. convince her because she always wanted a heritage house. So I convinced her that she could have her heritage house. You can imagine, I was living in a 1,000 square foot apartment in Silicon Valley, paying $1,600 a month. Okay, this is the 90s. You can imagine what it is today. So she got her heritage house, and it's still a work in progress, by the way. That's what it looks like. In rural Canada, I've been involved in building 3 separate companies. Powerlink, which was a large ISP in the 90s, filled up pretty well the whole interior of British Columbia. IP World, which was a network company, and this company was truly on its way to work with a major US utility company to build fiber optics on the power right-of-ways. And if it wouldn't have been for the .com bomb, that company would have been very successful. But my story isn't completely perfect. It bombed. I had to move for that company. We went into a company called Radforce. Originally started as what's known as a hosting service provider. Overnight, it seemed like this company grew across the country. We were selling cloud services. Microsoft came to us, IBM came to us, and just kept growing and growing and growing. Again, I'm sitting in my little home office for most of this, on the phone, on video, making this happen, and sometimes I just had to pinch myself in that just to give you an idea of the scale of the data centers that we built, the types of things that happened. And then suddenly somebody said, you know what? It's time to sell the company. So the company sold. I'm sitting there going, now what? At the same time as I'm going, now what? I'm reading a book called Bold. Has anybody else ever read the book Bold? Okay. This is one of those amazing books. Essentially, it talks about exponential versus linear technologies, about how opportunities go at a far higher rate than at any point in history. And the concept of moonshot thinking. Instead of just thinking about being an entrepreneur, what about being a moonshot entrepreneur, really shooting for the stars? And if you think back to the little town I came from, I kept thinking about these miners that moved to this town and these talented people, and they did this massive thing. They created the mines, or they mined the gold, but they also created, in our area, this smelter as well. These were 20-somethings that did this type of work. Why couldn't we do this? So I want to combine the rural opportunities with this moonshot thinking. At the same time, I want to say throughout this process, the environment is in the back of my mind. My brother's coming to me and saying, Brian, you just had this big win. Why don't we want to just focus on the environment? We need somebody to focus on the environment. And I thought to myself, well, I know things about technology, I know things about data, but how do I focus on the environment? And eventually it all came together. And big data is a real opportunity around this, is what we're talking about that. So here's the rural moonshot strategy. And I'm going to use what we're doing as an example for all of you, and I hope it brings through for you. I've also peppered throughout this presentation a number of books that are really influential. So the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, what's so significant about this? I'm going to read this quote, and it's not good to read during presentations, but this is significant. This author says, the period of change we are living through is more significant, and the ramifications of the latest technological revolution more profound than any prior period of human history. Okay? We did invent the wheel, right? We did invent electricity. So is this actually that big? Well, this author thinks so. So what are the 4 industrial revolutions? 1760 to 1840 was when we came up with power on site through steam and water. We came up with various ways to mechanize things and build things. So all the way back then. In the second revolution, we came up with a way to mass produce electricity, if you want to put it that way. We came up with a way with hydro dams and coal power and other things to create electricity, and then we could do mass production and assembly line. And this is actually right what hit in the little town I come from. This was major. We were inventing new power distribution lengths of lines that had never been seen in history to feed the mines. So we really won in this era here. The third industrial revolution was the personal computer, automation, and the internet. And this is really when a lot of things went back to the big city centers. For the most part, we didn't win nearly as much from this, but this little thing down the bottom here called the internet started to level the playing field. And today, this is where we sit. Nanotechnologies, robotics, Internet of Things, which we'll be talking about, which is what we're involved in, big data, artificial intelligence. Okay, a lot of times people hear this on CBC radio or whatever you're listening to and get scared of it, nervous about it. What about all the job loss? Well, I say we get in front of this. Okay, there's a real opportunity for our rural communities to be in front of this. So how do we do it? First of all, in your community, The most critical thing you can do is to find the team that you're going to work with to make this happen. Then the timing of what you're doing, is it relevant to today? The traction, and then finally, whatever that technology is going to be. Believe it or not, I'm a technologist, and that's the last one on the list. The next part of this is how you leverage your key rural advantages. And we're going to talk about what we did. Another key book that really influences my thinking is a book called The Rainforest. This is all about what was done in Silicon Valley, the secret of Silicon Valley, but they talk about extensively in the book how rural communities can share this. This can be done just about anywhere, but there is a pretty specific formula that you have to do to replicate this magic. But it is a fantastic book. You should take a read of it. We're now starting to get involved with other groups in Calgary and other areas that are involved in the rainforest process. It's actually a whole club, a thought process. It's amazingly open and sharing as the way you do things. I'm going to go through a bit of a checklist, and I know there's a lot of text, and I don't like a lot of text in presentation, but I want to compare us to Silicon Valley just so you can get an idea of what we've got, what's so special. Well, Silicon Valley has lots of entrepreneurs, and at the moment, we don't have any entrepreneurs. We have lots of venture capital, and at the moment, we don't have a lot of venture capital. They have lots of jobs. We're working on it. I'm just getting X's. It's probably not X's. It could be yellow check marks and some of those, but anyways, they have very smart, confident people. Well, I would say we definitely have the smart people, very genius people, so give us a yellow check mark. They have incredible education. In fact, the people that are coming in from all over the world, previously coming in from all over the world, Trump's kind of slowing that down, are very well educated. We have good education. They have lots of mentors. We're working on the mentor side. Many success stories. We have some success stories. Now, things change. Their lifestyle is not as great as you think. We have great lifestyles. Of course, we always talk about that. Their housing is incredibly expensive. You're lucky if you can make ends meet on a $200,000 a year salary. We have the affordable housing. Politically expensive health care. We have great health care. Political instability, politically stable for us. Poor data privacy rules, great data privacy rules for us. Risky personal safety, and I'll tell you, I ran into this myself when I was living down there. Quite risky. Good personal safety. Water shortages. I'm going to put multiple X's there. For the most part, we have water. And finally, their immigration program is dismal now, okay? And we have a fantastic immigration program. Immigration, I think everybody knows, built Silicon Valley. So we have an opportunity to jump this whole process of where do these entrepreneurs come from, venture capital, jobs, all kinds of things can come from immigration and other things I'm going to talk about in a minute. Okay? Hopefully that process, I haven't really tried that too many times, so hopefully that process gives you an idea of how we compare. One of the critical things that I learned is partnering with local government is way more important than you realize. So you saw Terry Van Horn speaking last night. Terry, a short time after Rackforce sold, she started talking to us and saying, can I get a little bit of your help to talk about data centers and opportunities in our region, what we've got, and then one thing led to the next. I realized we could really work with Terry. So one thing led to the next, and so many great things happened. Finding the local advantages, and this was largely with Terry's help. We really dug into what do we have. So having a ski resort or some big attraction, or even if you're in the wine industry or whatever you've got in your region, can be a major attraction. But that's just an attraction. You also need to figure out how to do the jobs. The next part is that we started working closely with tech. And this has been going on for quite a while. And as Terry described last night, it's amazing the talent that's in there, the fact that most of the periodic table exists in this facility, the PhDs that are there, the brain power, tapping into that. So that's something that we really started to do. And to this day, at this moment in time, we are working through that process of how exactly we partner on a major scale. We've had vice presidents from tech come in and start talking to us about what we're doing together, asking us to join in super clusters and other things. So very, very cool things are happening here. The Digital Fab Lab, I recommend that every region figure out how to do this. This is an MIT-grade digital fab lab. You can prototype just about anything in this facility. That exists in the region. There happened to be this amazing, empty 45,000 square foot building, and almost every rural region has something of real value that maybe you haven't quite figured out what to use it for. Well, this 45,000 square foot building was designed for specialty metals. It had just been built around 2011, and suddenly it was sitting empty. What could we use that for? The fact that we had some substantial industrial lands, the fact that we're close to US rail exchanges, the fact that we have a power dam and there's 80 megawatts, 80 megawatts, not 80 megawatts of power sitting with no home at this point in time. How could we use that? US border crossing, and the fact that we have a US shipping depot on the other side of the border. So we can get anything at the speed that anywhere else in the US can get it pretty well, because it's shipped to that depot and we can move very fast. So the other thing that we looked at is our regional advantages. The fact that this white area here is covered by the Columbia Basin Trust. Our little Metal Tech Valley region goes pretty well right about here. It's a little tiny area of the province, but the partnerships that we can have in the West Kootenays, in the East Kootenays, the fact that the whole Columbia Basin Trust is all after economic development, and how can we partner with in that region. And now we've started reaching out through our partnership with LCIC, we've reached out to Calgary. How can we partner there? And I just mentioned the rainforest group that's in Calgary. The other thing that was really interesting about Calgary is their venture capital understands resource-based economies. It's oil and gas, but oil and gas is suffering. They don't have a place to invest that money. Just because the oil and gas industry is suffering doesn't mean there isn't billions, literally billions of dollars sitting in bank accounts looking for a home to invest in, okay? So Calgary is a really interesting place for natural resource relationships. So that one there. We have substantial relationships with Vancouver and, of course, the Okanagan itself and Kamloops area. So we started to look at all these regional partnerships. How could we piece this all together? We'll talk about the fact that Vancouver wants to do this major supercluster and really can't do it without rural being in the bid. They need rural relationships so that they can have a really good chance of winning. So more rural opportunity. Now I want to mention something called Take Control of Your Master Switch. Have you ever heard of the book called Master Switch? So this is pretty interesting in that what they talk about in this book is all kinds of things, but things like telephone, radio, and film, built by entrepreneurs, now pretty well controlled by monopolies. The internet is one of the questions they're asking, will this happen to the internet as well? One of the key ways to control the internet is to control your network. And for the last 17, 18 years, the Columbia Basin Trust has been building out its own broadband initiative. But what I want to point out is it's not just broadband, it is a true active fiber network. So this is quite a bit more advanced than you would get from a regular telco, cable co. This gives us all kinds of options in the way we control bandwidth, affordability of bandwidth. You know, usually if telco has a monopoly on you, you're going to pay a fortune in a rural region. So I'm just saying that be very aware of who controls your master switch. Now, as far as the regional marketing strategy goes, you saw Terry talking about Metal Tech Alley last night. I personally think it's a brilliant name, combining metallurgical skills with technology and putting the two together. It's not called Silicon Valley North like so many people try to do. It is something different, and it's not a valley, it's an alley. So putting that together I thought was really cool. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can sell the resort lifestyle, that's so cool. But the thing not to forget is your industrial town and what's stuck in people's minds. So here's a picture of Trail. This is not their town. And this is what comes to mind for most people that aren't in the region as to what it looked like. Pretty well, most of the vegetation died. Yes, it did have some serious problems. But what's missing in the narrative of the story is how much effort tech put into solving its problem and what it looks like today. Okay? So there's the smelter on the right there, but that's what the region looks like. Vegetation is growing back. They're putting serious effort into the downtown core. It's a nice, perfect shot with the ski hill in the background way at the top there. Its air is cleaner than pretty well every major city there is. So, you know, if in people's minds, they forget how much this has improved and what a success story tech is and the efforts that it's put to make this happen. So, these are things that you have to really promote and to make yourself successful. Now, how do you find these entrepreneurs that you need so badly in your community? So, I'm using myself as an example. I'm what's known as a boomerang. And somebody said last night, I'm trying to remember it was Heather, did you say the back by 30 or something like that? Back at 30. I have never heard that one. That one is so exciting, I get chills just thinking about it. Okay, promoting to our young youth. Essentially, they go out into the world, say through their 20s, they get lots of experience. There are amazingly successful young people that come from our rural communities. And I can't tell you how many times I've run into multi-millionaires, but they're stuck in the city. They don't think about coming back yet. So what if we do it back at 30 and we work really hard to bring them back? And then if they come back, then they're called boomerangs. In my case, I also recruited my business partner from Ragforce. He's an out-of-towner, so to speak, but he had heard me talk so much about my rural town that he said, you know what, I'll do this with you. I'll help you. And he has invested a lot of money. So to help out. So it's been really great. And the other part is your immigrant talent. Okay, a lady named Pilar Portela. Started talking to her. She came and visited me in Rawson. I didn't know it, but she was looking for that perfect town region to move to. And she said she would move. And boy, has that been exciting. What an amazing brain, and so different from her experiences in life. She runs global software projects, very good at innovation. She was the CEO of Accelerate Okanagan for a year. So she brought with her a whole bunch of opportunities and things that we could learn from. Now, our go-to-market strategy, we decided that we would focus on, based on our location, industrial Internet of Things. How many people here know what the Internet of Things is? So it's pretty good cross-section. Rural towns are going to be majorly affected by it, and if you just read what's there, it's a simple description, the way in which we connect all industrial things, living and non-living, to the Internet. It means we're going to be able to collect data. And Chart was talking last night about how important that is, collecting data. What I suggest is adding to that is real-time data, and reacting in real time is going to be the most exciting of all. That's big data, it's artificial intelligence. As far as the moonshot goes, this market is about $14.2 trillion by 2030. That's a moonshot. How do you get the venture capital? So what we did was we set up a venture capital corporation. In British Columbia and in many provinces across the country, you can get tax credits if you set up these venture capital corporations properly. Every $100 gets $30 back at tax time. Okay. We get an allocation of a certain amount of money, but every $100 invested by a VC investor, just to be clear, gets $30 back at tax time. And again, you can do this in other provinces in the country as well. So the first thing we did was we brought in our own entrepreneur investment. So we had to show commitment to this project. So we put our own investment in. Now we're in the process of bringing our institutional investment in, high net worth individuals in the community that really want to invest in the community and can definitely afford it. And we will consider community investment, but we definitely don't want large sums of money from people that can't afford it. But this is a great way to get started. We think that setting up an incubator, accelerator, innovation center is a good idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical, but in our case, we did set up a physical facility. We call it International Industrial IoT Innovation Center. We want to be one of the world's best at industrial Internet of Things. And I foresee, by the way, is I foresee. Okay, leverage the heck out of your dollars. Every dollar you get, you can leverage. In our case, we approached the trust. You've heard about Columbia Basin Trust multiple times here already. We approached the trust with the idea of putting some money into the venture capital fund. We said, we're not really in the venture capital fund business, but we are interested in partnering with you based on what you said, and we'll buy that building for you. Pretty cool. And
that was the 45,000 square foot.
That was the 45,000 square foot building, that's right. If that doesn't look like Silicon Valley, what does, right? State-of-the-art, specialty metals, millions and millions of dollars investment in this. It has clean rooms, it has lab space, it has fabrication space. If it's just sitting there with no no real purpose. Some people talked about grow-up for a little while and a few other things, but it wasn't going anywhere. So the right brains came together and created this opportunity. Now, getting grants, because of all the things that had happened, and Pilar here, this is Pilar Bertella, the CEO, and there's Terry. Together, they partnered and wrote an amazing World Dividend Fund grants, and that brought in $800K. Now, our responsibility as part of that is to put in about $200K, but we thought that was pretty good leverage for our money. And now, attracting the target companies. We decided that our target was all the Americas, and it actually happened after I went on a trip to India and realized that this is just a little much. But all the Americas, we're going after companies that are already in revenue, so they already have products that they're selling. Target Americas, I mentioned that. Promote our easy access to the US market. So they come to Canada, they might set up a BC company or a Canadian company, and then they've got easy access to the US market. We promote our excellent immigration, which right now they can't utilize in the US. And we promote the advantage of the region that we talked about already. To date, we have an analytics company. I love this name or what it does, augmented business intelligence. So it takes the concept of massive amounts of data, applies artificial intelligence, but the objective is to augment human ability. So it does this two-way, and I'm talking a little bit theoretical, we're working through this process now, but the concept is that it learns what you do as an employee, and it learns the data of what you affect, and it's constantly improving. It's constantly advising you what you could do next to reduce emissions, to make machine run better, to help other human beings in the operations. So that's a really cool company, and it's got, I've sat through some amazing meetings with big companies and seen the impact that it has. The other thing we've got is an environmental sensor company, a world-leading environmental sensor company that has started taking our investment and is located in our building now, and we're just about to start scaling up a whole sensor assembly line for them. We also have a drone company that is doing big industrial projects, flying over top of power lines, doing environmental stuff. Very exciting company here as well. Drones, surprisingly, you would think, why would you be building drones? Isn't that all going to happen in China? Well, these are highly customized drones. Now, my next book. How about the blockchain? Has anybody heard of the blockchain? All right, this one's pretty good coverage. Blockchain is touted to be as big as the internet or bigger. And the idea is it's a global ledger of recorded information. Hi, Claudia. Sorry, I haven't seen Claudia in a long time. It's touted as it's a way to record forever blocks of information in a chain in a decentralized way. And so many people believe in this that now all the big banks, everybody's paying attention to what is about to happen. It is the underpinning for applications such as Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum. But it's more than that. It is a true playing field leveler, and they're talking about third world countries, how they'll be affected. You'll be able to do microtransactions. You'll be able to do smart contracts instead of having to always have some sort of legal process in the middle of getting data from one place and who gets access to it. That'll all be eliminated based on who you are and your reputation. Blockchain is going to change our world, and it is well worth the read. And this book happens to be by a very prominent Canadian writer, Don Tapscott, and it is well worth the read. If there's anything you read next, that's what I suggest. So we have brought our first blockchain company in. We're very excited about it. These are servers, run about 6 kilowatts each. We're putting them inside the building to start, and in the near future, they will actually be running in these specialized containers that hold them, because there's the cooling and everything. It's ideal if you can put them outside the building. So we're working on that as well. As I mentioned, we're working on assembly lines. People ask, why would you do assembly lines? Well, the reality, instead of China, the reality is when you're doing prototypes and small runs, you need your own assembly lines. You can't afford to go to China unless you're doing very large ones. So we're doing that, and also with robotics, you can get your costs down. The other part is driving revenue up quickly. So we're doing a time-to-market program. We actually are recruiting companies in industrial Internet of Things to come to us. We're going to do training. We're bringing in really high-end speakers, and we take them through a whole process to educate them. In a way, it's like a dragon's den, I guess, in reverse. You teach them, but then you start to find out, hey, is there a palatable fit? So that's how we're going to start attracting companies to us as well. I mentioned supercluster, so we are working on the process right now on becoming part of a major Western supercluster around digital technologies, Internet of Things. That's underway. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you might be in a big city, but if you don't have some sort of rural involvement, then the federal government's not as likely to put money into you. These superclusters are going to be somewhere in the $150 to $200 million investment range from the federal government, so these are substantial, so we want to be part of this. So, sorry, my microphone here is rotating. Ideas for your rural region. What are you good at? I'm just going to wrap up here with talking about some really interesting things that really exist in most rural areas. Metallurgical works of mining. So this is essentially what we have in our area. This person down the bottom left is obviously in a very dangerous environment wearing a mask. We are nearly at the point where we can put biosensors on his body, and we can know exactly if he's in trouble or not. We can know if, even before he gets on site, if he happens to have drugs in his system or alcohol or anything that could hurt this individual. Also, is he in a stress situation? So many things we're going to be able to know and apply big data on the body of the individual themselves. Of course, this is already happening where drones are flying over mine sites. They're surveying the size of a pile, how much is available, maybe the truck has stopped, all kinds of things. And this right picture is really interesting. Essentially, it's artificial intelligence running a whole mining operation. Completely automated. If we take the charts concept of hotspots and we map them out, we've got a number of metallurgical, almost I would assume these are all pretty well smelters. We could combine all those together and get more big data and more insight and more knowledge. So much innovation could happen around every one of those red hotspots. Same thing for the mines. You know, just like I don't know if you can see, this isn't a very good graphic, but there's essentially a number of mines, and you could do the same thing for mines. So much innovation and so much opportunity around those things. Farming, we have a lot of farming communities. I was really looking for the right type of graphic that would describe how much is going on the farm, because it is amazing. The problem is that today's farmer has now moved to the point where they're starting to get all this technology, but they're completely overwhelmed by the data. If you're overwhelmed by the data, you can't do very much. So that's exactly where companies like ours and others are working on how do you simplify and actually have decisions being made maybe without the farmer in this case. Okay, again, hotspots. Look at this, you know, you could take all your wheat farms, for example, or your dairy farms, connect it all together. There's so much opportunity in those regions again. Forestry management. Forestry is changing so much. This picture down here is technology that's going to plant 100,000 trees a day. Not only is it going to plant 100,000 trees, it's going to go out and survey the land in advance, figure out exactly where those trees should go. And this goes out, and there's a second drone that goes out that has a, almost like a gun that shoots the seed right into the ground. Flies over, boom, shoots it right into the ground. These machines are going to be automated and run by computer. And of course, GIS and everything else, all the technologies that come into play. Again, take all the communities, map them out. Here's just, I just searched on the internet. You can figure out exactly what communities are solely reliant on forestry. For example, all the green ones there are 80 to 100% reliant on forestry. Unexpected opportunities. You may not know what your town or region is good at. Well, here's an example of Golden. It sits along Highway 1. All these trucks are coming by all the time and they're breaking down. They have 9 auto repair shops. What if you used big data and actually track those trucks as they're coming in, and you know that this truck has got something that's failing, and you actually route it to one of the repair shops and repair it in real time so it doesn't have to stop. It's a great supply management opportunity. Eco-management, all kinds of eco-management opportunities around the environment. Risk management, what about forest fire? It's a huge challenge. think everybody knows British Columbia has been under enormous pressure this year. How about dams, all these types of things. So that's my presentation. I hope it was helpful. I just want to say that there's so much opportunity here. I may not have been able to bring across how much opportunity there is for rural British Columbia or rural Canada, but there is substantial opportunity for rural Canada. You want to get in front of this. So there's the other point I just want to mention. There's a great opportunity for us to collaborate and work as a team. Let's not work independently and try to solve all these things. And then finally, that's where how rural Canada can win with the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.